It earned the nickname Germany's armored backbone. But for the men trapped inside, the Panzer IV was nothing more than a metal death trap hiding secrets darker than anyone could imagine. Created in 1934 under a fake code name and thrust into combat with only 15 mm of protective steel, the crews went to battle high on government-supplied speed pills, only to witness their trusted machine get overwhelmed and destroyed from the Polish fields to the frozen Russian battlegrounds. What was it really like to stay alive inside Germany's most feared tank? And how did a vehicle meant to help foot soldiers turn into a symbol of war's horror? January 1934. While the entire world kept a close eye on any hints of German military buildup, army designers in Berlin secretly created plans for what they called a medium tractor. This fake name didn't fool anyone. What they really wanted was a tank that could match their new strategy of quick, coordinated strikes. Blitzkrieg without saying the word. The Panzer I and II would break through first. The Panzer III would fight other tanks. And this fresh design, which would become the Panzer IV, was built to destroy bunkers and smash defensive lines using a short-barreled 75 mm cannon. Basic design and quick production mattered more than making it perfect. The first models, called AUSF-A, came out with only 15 m of front armor and simple leaf spring suspension, good enough to stop bullets and shell fragments. But not much more. Beneath the steel shell, a 250-horsepower Maybach motor drove its 18-ton body through thick mud and tight country roads. During those first years, Germany only had about 200 Panzer IVs ready as they planned to attack Poland. When September 1, 1939 came around, Panzer IVs made up less than 1/10 of Germany's tank forces, just over 200 out of nearly 2,700 total tanks. They were spread out in small groups, maybe 20 or 30 per division, but their job was obvious: lead the charge, destroy machine gun positions, and clear the path for lighter tanks to rush forward. Tank crews had to work for days without rest, and the hidden reason for their endless energy wasn't just excitement. Pervitin, a small white tablet, was given out by the millions. It was methamphetamine with a fancy label, and it kept drivers and gunners alert and focused through 72 hours of non-stop fighting. Germany's lightning war ran on drugs just as much as smart tactics. In Poland, the Panzer IV's 75 mm gun did exactly what engineers planned. It cracked concrete bunkers, smashed trenches, and made defenders flee in terror. But the thin armor quickly revealed its weaknesses. Any good anti-tank rifle could pierce right through the hull. When the fighting moved to France, Panzer IVs encountered the French WWII, a tank with armor too heavy for the short gun to break through. Tank crews quickly discovered this wasn't a machine for tank versus tank battles. It was a support weapon, and when facing real enemy tanks, it was completely outclassed. Even so, during those early campaigns, the mix of speed, teamwork, and pure courage won the day. The problems were obvious, but so were the wins. Life inside was crowded and stressful. 5 soldiers crammed together, surrounded by explosive shells, sweating in wool clothing during hot summers or shivering in cold spring mud. The only thing certain was that nothing was certain. Any enemy hit might kill them all, and getting out alive was never promised. The tank's blueprint included escape hatches for each crew member, offering some hope, but the reality of fire and bursting shells made every fight a deadly gamble. The Panzer IV made its crews feel like they were using the most advanced war technology. But death was always a possibility. The early victories hid a coming disaster. In future battles, heavy weapons and thick armor would count more than quick movement or surprise attacks. And for Panzer IV crews, their biggest challenge was still ahead. Summer 1941 brought a harsh wake-up call. German tank soldiers who had crushed Poland and France now faced Soviet T-34s and KV-1s, machines that bounced off almost every shot the Wehrmacht fired. Battle reports overflowed with shock and disbelief. Crews watched their shells bounce harmlessly off angled armor, while their own tanks got picked apart from long distance by Soviet 76 mm guns. The Panzer III, even with its upgraded 50 mm cannon, still couldn't compete. But the Panzer IV, with its short-barreled 75 mm, was practically useless. The High Command's solution came in spring 1942. The Panzer IV SFF-2, now armed with the long-barreled 75 mm Koduke 40L-43 gun. Instantly, The tank that once blasted concrete positions could now punch through T-34s from over a kilometer away. Combat reports told the whole story. At 1,200 meters, the new cannon could penetrate Soviet armor from any direction. Crews who once had to attempt desperate side attacks could now hunt enemy tanks from the front. The F-2's appearance changed everything, though only for a short time. But the Eastern Front was just half the test. In North Africa, the F-2, soon nicknamed the Panzer IV Special by British forces, faced completely different challenges. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, these tanks destroyed American M3 Stuarts and Shermans from ranges the Allies couldn't reach. One American unit lost 40 out of 47 tanks in just one battle. Allied gunners nicknamed their 37mm rounds Squirrel Rifles. However, the desert proved just as deadly as any British or American enemy. Inside a Panzer IV, temperatures climbed above 50 degrees C. Metal parts burned exposed skin. Crews could actually cook eggs on the armor plating. Sand crept into every crack, turning lubricating oil into grinding powder. Motors ran too hot, track links broke down, and weapons got stuck. A mechanical failure in the open desert meant certain death or capture. So, tank crews became masters at emergency fixes, making repairs with whatever scraps they could find. Water and gasoline supplies ran dangerously low, and often the real fight was over basic supplies rather than against enemy forces. Desert war journals described nights spent freezing in the cold after days roasting under the blazing sun. Insects covered everything. The tank's tight interior turned into a mixture of perspiration, grease, and terror. When defeat finally came in Tunisia with no way to escape, Afrika Korps crews destroyed their own machines, dumping sand into gas tanks, running motors until they broke completely, then destroying the cannons with a shell and some wire. The final action wasn't giving up, but making sure enemies found only twisted metal. For the Panzer IV, these harsh experiences forced a new kind of growth. The hard lessons from the East and the desert influenced every improvement that came after. Heavier armor, stronger weapons, better defenses. But with each change, the cost for crews was paid through sweat, creative solutions, and sometimes their very lives. By 1944, the Panzer IV remained the core of German tank divisions. But what came off the assembly line looked and operated completely different from the early war vehicles. The AUSF H and J models, created from desperation, showed every shortage of a struggling wartime economy. The powered turret rotation was gone. Crews now had to manually crank the heavy turret by hand, requiring a full minute to make one complete turn under perfect conditions. During the chaos of combat, that felt like forever. Steel road wheels took the place of the old rubber ones, a solution for constant shortages that only made the ride bumpier and repairs more difficult. The newer armor, supposedly thicker, was often fragile from hurried steel production and poor heat processing. A direct strike could crack a plate apart instead of deflecting the hit. The real emergency, though, was with the soldiers themselves. Training programs that once lasted 16 weeks had been cut down to barely 4 weeks. Some replacement crews got just 1 month of preparation before getting sent to active combat zones. Teenagers, many too young to grow facial hair, climbed into tanks with barely enough time to understand the basic controls, never mind learning advanced tactics or maintenance skills. Personal accounts from late 1944 tell of drivers destroying transmissions, ammunition handlers dropping shells, and tank commanders fighting just to keep their crews alive long enough to gain any real experience. Combat readiness crashed completely. Factory records from winter 1944 to 1945 reveal that only about 62% of Panzer IVs given to military units could actually fight. The others sat broken down by mechanical failures, missing components, or lack of trained crews. During the same time period, newer Panthers and Tigers performed even worse, with readiness numbers falling as low as 37%. The Panzer IV, once famous for working reliably, was now kept running through salvaged parts and battlefield fixes. As the Red Army pushed forward and the Western Allies pressed from the opposite direction, Panzer IV crews faced terrible odds. Outgunned, outnumbered, and increasingly undertrained. What had begun as the Wehrmacht's reliable workhorse had turned into a symbol of a war machine running on empty. Every tank and each crew member was pushed beyond their limits. For many soldiers, the truth was harsh. A tank that couldn't move or fire was just a steel tomb waiting for its next occupant. Long after the final German tanks surrendered in Europe, The Panzer IV got new paint jobs, fresh equipment, and was shipped off to fight different wars under foreign flags. No other German tank from World War II created such an enormous family of variants. The basic frame became the foundation for an entire range of specialized vehicles: assault guns, tank destroyers, and heavy artillery pieces on tracks. The Jagdpanzer IV, built starting in 1944, replaced the rotating turret with a low, fixed fighting compartment and a long 75mm cannon, transforming the old reliable tank into a tank hunter with a profile barely taller than a crouching soldier. Over 1,700 Jagdpanzer IVs rolled off production lines before Germany's surrender, and a few survived the war scattered across Europe and the Middle East. The Panzer IV's second life extended far beyond the destroyed remains of the Reich. During the 1950s and 60s, Syria searched post-war Europe for leftover armor, gathering Panzerviehs from France, Czechoslovakia, and even Spain. By 1967, at least 25 were still working, dug into defensive positions on the Golan Heights, fighting alongside a mixed collection of other German vehicles. When the Six-Day War began, these tanks, some over 20 years old, fired their final rounds against Israeli Centurions and Shermans. Not